Snow drifted across the deserted Christmas depot like torn pieces of a forgotten letter, swirling around the young teacher as she stepped off the train with a heart stitched together by hope. She clutched her worn carpet bag close, the fabric still carrying the faint scent of the small room she'd left behind, a place full of quiet dreams and second-hand courage. The letter that had brought her here, promising a schoolhouse, lodging, and a welcoming family, felt almost foolish now in her pocket, softened at the edges by the warmth of her expectations. The platform was still. Lantern light trembled against the winter wind. No carriage waited. No smiling family approached. Only a single figure stood farther down the platform, a man shifting his weight nervously, as if his boots carried guilt rather than snow. She recognized him at once. His handwriting had been softer than his eyes now appeared. He glanced at her, then at the people behind the depot windows, and the hesitation in his face revealed the truth long before he turned away. Without a word, he stepped into the warmth of his family's wagon and let it roll off into the night, leaving her standing with the echo of betrayal ringing louder than the fading hoofbeats. She didn't chase after him. Pride held her still, even as her breath grew thin against the cold. She lowered herself onto the wooden bench, the board stiff and frozen beneath her, and tried to steady the trembling in her hands. The depot keeper locked up without noticing her tucked in the shadows, too busy hurrying home to his own Christmas table. A stray dog wandered by, circling her bags before settling nearby, sensing the kind of loneliness that asks for quiet companionship. The world dimmed as clouds gathered, and the silence wrapped itself around her shoulders like a heavy wool she couldn't shrug off. She told herself she would wait just a little longer, though she didn't know for what, another train, a miracle, or simply the courage to face the truth. Snow thickened on the roof, whispering that she had nowhere to go, and for the first time since childhood, she felt the sting of being truly abandoned. She curled on the bench, pulling her thin shawl close, trying to hold on to whatever warmth she could salvage from the fading day. Just as her eyes began to slip shut, a crunch of boots disturbed the quiet. A tall silhouette approached through the drifting flakes, steady, deliberate, carrying the kind of presence that didn't rush or hesitate. He paused a few feet away, as though he feared startling her, as though he recognized the fragility of someone trying not to fall apart. She lifted her head, heart thudding once in her chest. The stranger didn't speak, but something in the way he stood, calm, grounded, watching her with a concern he tried not to show, told her the night had shifted. She wasn't entirely alone anymore, though she didn't yet know whether that would save her, or simply change the shape of her story. He stepped closer only when he was sure she saw him, moving with the cautious gentleness of a man used to approaching frightened animals, not out of insult, but instinct. The lantern above the depot door flickered, casting his shadow long across the snow. He kept his hands visible, his posture open, as though offering safety without demanding trust. She noticed the wear in his coat, the honest kind that spoke of work rather than neglect, and the quiet steadiness in his eyes, warm but careful. He asked if she was waiting for someone, his voice soft enough not to disturb the brittle quiet around them. She answered with a nod that faltered, the truth slipping out in a quiet breath. The man she'd come to meet had left her behind. No home, no schoolhouse, no place to go on a night that belonged to families. The words trembled, but she forced them steady, determined not to appear helpless. The rancher listened without interruption, the way people do when they respect the weight of another's pain. His silence felt like a blanket rather than a void. A gust of wind cut through her shawl, and he saw her shiver before she could hide it. He shrugged off his heavy coat and draped it across her shoulders, not asking permission. The warmth settled instantly, unexpectedly, like a small mercy she hadn't earned but desperately needed. She whispered a protest, but he shook his head with a faint, almost shy tilt of his lips. The gesture wasn't gallantry, it was reflex, the kindness of someone who'd spent years caring more than speaking. He told her he lived several miles outside town, on a ranch tucked between rolling hills and quiet pines. His sister was visiting with her 2 boys for Christmas, he explained, as if offering proof that his home held light rather than danger. She sensed no hidden intentions, only an honest desire to help a stranger who clearly had nowhere to lay her head. Still, a lifetime of caution urged her to hesitate. He waded through it, patient as a snowfall, giving her space to decide. When she finally nodded, he let out the kind of breath men release when they've been holding hope too tightly. He carried her carpet bag to his horse, tying it securely before helping her mount. The mare snorted, stamping the snow as if eager to be on the move. He climbed up behind her, not close, not touching, riding just near enough to catch her if she slipped. They traveled through fields blanketed in moonlit white. The sound of hooves was rhythmic, soothing, almost melodic against the hush of the night. She watched the horizon where the sky bent low, glowing with a faint promise of warmth. He rode with quiet confidence, glancing at her only to ensure she hadn't succumbed to the cold. When they reached the ranch, golden light spilled from the windows, flickering like a welcome she hadn't expected. Yet as he opened the door, the laughter inside abruptly stilled. Faces turned toward her with surprise and uncertain judgment. She froze on the threshold, unsure whether she was stepping into safety or another kind of storm. Morning arrived as a soft glow slipping across the quilt she'd been given, warming her face before she even opened her eyes. For a moment she didn't know where she was, only that the air smelled faintly of pine logs and baking bread instead of cold wood and fear. Then memory settled, slow, fragile, but real. The ranch, the stranger's steady voice, the warmth she had not expected to survive the night to feel again. She sat up carefully, half afraid the comfort was temporary, something that might vanish if she breathed too deeply. His sister greeted her with a gentle smile, the kind worn by women who had raised children and carried burdens quietly. She placed a cup of steaming tea in the teacher's hands and said she could rest as long as she needed. No questions, no mistrust, just kindness wrapped in domestic calm. The nephews peeked from behind their mother, shy at first, then bold enough to ask if she knew stories. She promised she did, though her voice wavered with the unfamiliar sensation of being wanted. Throughout the day, she moved slowly through the house, offering small helps, folding linens, stirring a pot, straightening toys. Each gesture giving her a sense of belonging she hadn't dared imagine. Outside the frosted windows, the rancher worked with patient rhythm, clearing snow from the porch and checking fence lines. His movements were steady, almost meditative, as though everything he touched was something he'd sworn to protect. She watched from inside, feeling a strange warmth bloom in her chest at the quiet discipline he carried in every gesture. Later, he returned to the house with snow melting in his hair. He paused when he saw her reading to the nephews, his gaze softening in a way she pretended not to notice. When she looked up, he quickly turned toward the fireplace, poking at embers as though they needed his full concentration. She wasn't sure what unsettled him more, her presence or the comfort it seemed to bring him. They crossed paths often through the day. Small moments, shared glances, the kind of fragile connection that grows only when two souls learn to breathe in the same quiet. He helped her warm her hands properly by holding them near the oven door, guiding her without touching. She listened to him hum a low tune while repairing a broken chair leg. They rode together to fetch water from the creek, frost sparkling on every branch like captured starlight. Snowflakes landed on her lashes, and he looked away too quickly, as though the sight pulled at something he wasn't prepared to feel. But peace rarely lasts in a world built on pride and rumor. Near dusk, the merchant's son arrived at the ranch, face red with shame disguised as anger. He didn't come to ask forgiveness, but to salvage his reputation. He spun half-truths, insisting she'd misunderstood, claiming she'd arrived uninvited, trying to make her small so he could feel tall. His voice was sharp, shaky at the edges. The rancher stepped between them. No threats, no raised voice, just a calm presence that cut through the bluster. His stillness made the other man restless, his lies thinner by the second. The confrontation lasted only minutes before the merchant's son fled, his pride bruised deeper than any wound. When the door closed, she looked at the rancher, unsure whether to thank him or simply breathe in the relief. He didn't meet her gaze, but the quiet between them felt different now, warmer, heavier, threaded with understanding neither dared name. That night, she found him sitting by the fire, the glow catching the tired lines beneath his eyes. She sank into the seat across from him, wary of disturbing the peace, but drawn to it just the same. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence stretched between them like a soft woven blanket, comforting and full of unspoken truths. Outside, wolves called from distant hills, their voices drifting through the cold air, reminders that the world beyond the ranch still held danger. Inside, she felt something bloom in the space between heartbeats, a fragile hope she had never expected to feel again, though she didn't yet dare to claim it. And the rancher, staring quietly into the firelight, seemed to wonder whether a stranger's arrival on a winter night could change the course of a life already shaped by solitude. The morning of Christmas broke with a brittle stillness, the kind that settles over land holding its breath. She woke before the others, drawn to the window by a feeling she couldn't name. Hoofprints marked the fresh snow, too many to belong to a single rider. The sight unsettled her enough that she pulled on the rancher's coat, still hanging by the door, and stepped onto the porch. He was already outside, standing in the center of the yard like a man bracing for a storm he'd hoped wouldn't come. The world around him was silent but tense. In the distance, several riders approached, men from town, their faces carved with the sharp edges of gossip and misjudgment. She moved toward him, and he glanced at her with an expression that held both apology and resolve. He hadn't expected trouble, but he had prepared himself to face it alone. She felt a surge of something stronger than fear, something shaped like belonging, and she stepped to his side before he could tell her to go back inside. The riders halted at the fence line, their horses snorting clouds into the cold air. The merchant's son sat among them, his jaw clenched, his posture stiff with a fragile confidence of someone hiding behind others. He spoke first, his words coated in accusation, claiming impropriety, claiming insult, claiming the rancher had harbored her in secret. His voice shook, but he spoke loudly, believing noise could become truth. The rancher didn't raise his own voice. He simply said she had been abandoned at the depot, cold and alone, and any decent man would have done the same. His calmness frustrated the merchant's son, who pressed harder, spreading lies with desperation. The other men shifted uneasily, glancing at her as if waiting for her to contradict or confess. She stepped forward. Her heart pounded, but her voice came out steady, clear, the kind of clarity that breaks winter glass. She told them she had been promised a home and a teaching post, and the man who made those promises turned away. She told them the rancher had shown her nothing but respect, that she'd slept under the same roof as his sister and nephews, treated as a guest and nothing more. Each word chipped away at the doubts until the truth lay bare beneath the cold morning sun. Silence followed. Then, one by one, the men dismounted. Some apologized. Some mumbled excuses. Some simply nodded with shame settling heavy on their shoulders. The preacher among them raised his hand and offered a quiet blessing, calling the matter resolved. The merchant's son, exposed and trembling, turned his horse and rode off without looking back. When the yard finally emptied, she felt her breath return. The rancher exhaled slowly, a breath that carried relief and something deeper, something like acceptance. She looked up at him, the winter light catching in his eyes, and realized she had never seen a man stand for someone the way he had stood for her. Not out of pride, not out of duty, but out of something honest and quietly brave. She spoke first, though her voice softened with the weight of fragile hope. She admitted she had nowhere to go once the snow melted and the holidays passed. The words trembled not with fear, but with the possibility she didn't dare frame into a question. He answered without hesitation. He said the ranch had felt different since she arrived. Warmer, lived in, as though the halls had been waiting for footsteps like hers. He didn't ask her to stay out of charity. He simply told her she was welcome, for as long as her heart wished to call the place home. Snowflakes drifted around them like quiet blessings. Inside, the boys' laughter rose over the soft clatter of breakfast, and the scent of fresh bread seeped through the door. She took in the ranch, the hills, the sky stretching wide with promise. Home, she realized, wasn't a place she had lost. It was a place she had been led to. And as she stood beside the rancher, the old truth settled over her like a warm wool blanket. Sometimes the winter that tries to break us is the very season that brings the person who will put us back together. On Frontier Myths, the tale would be told this way. Some hearts are not rescued by grand gestures, but by the quiet stranger who refuses to let them freeze. And the Christmas morning where courage finally speaks.